So, fellow seeker, the second thing you need to know as an emerging coach is fear of failure. Fear of failure is that nagging self doubt and anxiety. It is compounded by the feeling that if you do get things wrong, then it's going to result in the destruction of your reputation. It's going to result in the destruction of your standing, and it's going to result in the destruction of your future. Fear of failure, like imposter syndrome, is a very debilitating fixation to develop. And it can be so avoided, and it can be so avoidable. All you have to do is to reset your frame. You have to reframe the narrative that you're living under. And you have to start telling yourself a different kind of story about your experiences. I'm going to assume that if you're watching this presentation, it is because you are, in fact, alive. And if you are, in fact, alive, this suggests to me that you have successfully survived every so-called failure that you've experienced. The problem with the term failure is that it locks a person into a time and space when they believe that that failure occurred. And so many people believe that they have failed at some stage in their life, and then they spend the rest of their lives just reliving that failure or using that failure as the benchmark against which they gauge and qualify everything they do. And because they do that, they learn to fear failure because the thing that they call failure has caused them so much emotional damage and so much emotional hurt. And if you put your hands into the fire and you get burned, is it not logical to be afraid of putting your hand into the fire? Now, this is a clumsy analogy, I will grant you, but I think the point stands. Fear of failure is the fear of replicating something which has caused you harm in the past. And the reason it's caused you harm in the past is because of the way you framed the experience. So, what might be a solution for you? And interestingly enough, what might be the same solution for anybody that you choose to coach? Well, the very basic answer is this: reframe failure as learning. Instead of dwelling on the notion of failure, start to apply the notion of learning. When you experienced what you call failure, did your life stop? Or did you indeed wake up the next day and have to pick up the pieces and go forward? Your life was not stopped or arrested at the point of the failure. However, if you dwell on the failure and you turn it into something frightening and fearful, then some element of your development was arrested at that point. If you work on the premise that you are here now, and the reason you are here now is because you survived the things which took you aback, and if you work on the premise that you are here now because you learned to adapt and you learned to deal with what you call failure, then logically it follows that you can continue to use that same skill. And if you learned the skill of adaptation, then you learned the skill of learning. And if you learned how to learn, it means that what you call failure was in fact an opportunity to learn. If you take this knowledge, that fear of failure is actually a pathology, it's a perversion, if you like. It's a form of energy which is misspending itself. It's like a lot of negative energies like envy and greed. It's an energy which is defeating you and it's keeping you from getting the things you want. Having said that, you may want lots of things which you cannot achieve right now. So let's separate the issues. Your fear of failure is based on a misconception, a delusion. And the delusion is that your fear of failure is based on a misconception and a delusion. And the misconception and the delusion are that failure is a real thing. Failure in other places has been called false evidence appearing real. No, it doesn't, that's fear. If you are tied up with a fear of failure, it is because the narrative that you have created has rendered failure as a real thing. When in fact, what you should be doing is focusing on the learning and the opportunity to learn and the opportunity to grow that the experience provided for you. People who dwell on the fear of failure often start projects, go in gung-ho with lots and lots of enthusiasm. Then they learn and they get their fingers burned and they reach a point where they feel that all of their fears have become real and that failure is back. And what they do then is go back to the top of the roller coaster and repeat the same mythical process. However, if you get to that stage where you feel that you are facing failure, instead of being afraid of it, you should welcome it and embrace it as your opportunity to learn, because only then are you going to push through into the next success that's waiting for you. Where I'm going with this is that if you apply your knowledge of yourself and you look around and you see that your clients are experiencing similar things that you've diagnosed and can now fix, that puts you into the driver's seat and it puts you into a great position to be able to assist and serve other people. So let's eradicate this false notion that failure defines us, and let's assert the actual truth of the matter, which is that our learning is what truly defines us. My own realization about fear of failure came when I had to come to terms with the fact that, again, I was expressing a form of vanity. I was allowing my fear of failure to give me a badge of honor. It was enabling me to go through my life believing that somehow I was more hard done to than other people. And the truth of the matter is, everybody has struggles. Everybody has challenges that they have to overcome. Everybody, secretly, in some respect, is suffering some kind of loss or some kind of mishap. What I did was I constructed my fear of failure as a shell around me, which enabled me to continue failing and to justify failing. I became the very thing that I was most afraid of. And once I realized that I could embrace my failures and go back and re-narrate them as the things that I'd learned about, I realized that all of those things that I'd called failures were in fact challenges and hurdles and tests that I'd overcome successfully. Unfortunately, the thing that was causing me to be less successful than I should have been was fear of failing again. Once I realized that the things which I believed had been failures were continuing to hold me back into the future, it made me a much more effective practitioner. It also meant that when I saw a fear of failure in a client, I was able to nail that down, address it, and to offer positive strategies, shall we say, to assist a person to overcome those fears and see those fears for what they are: delusional thoughts. False evidence appearing real is an acronym applied to the word fear. I would strongly advise anybody to stop using the word failure. It's a delusional term and it's employed by delusional people. Wake up and smell the coffee, people. So, fellow seeker, if you enjoyed the import of this presentation so far, I'd like to once again remind you to click on the link provided. I've got lots of modules, lots of resources. My mission is to encourage people to become life coaches in a more rapid and speedy fashion than I have. My mission is to fast track people. I can give you the means to be able to set up as a life coach, a functioning life coach, within 7 days. All you have to do is access the kinds of materials that you need to dispel a lot of those doubts and a lot of those misgivings. Click on the link and on to the next thing.